So please put your hands together and welcome Rachel Geyer to the stage. From TeraHash, of course. Next up, we have none other than Adam Back, the co-founder and CEO of Blockstream. Please come on down, Adam. Keep the applause going, everyone. Keep the applause going. Followed by Sven Hildebrandt, Dr. Sven Hildebrandt. And finally, Sam Tabar, the CEO of Bit Digital. Have a fantastic panel, guys. Do stay along and enjoy it.
Whoops. Well, I've just sat on my cord and pulled my microphone off, but slight technical hiccup.
Testing, okay.
Testing, testing. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Well, we're here to talk about mining and what mining can do for the energy landscape of the world. Let me first introduce who we've got here on the panel. The guy to my left hardly needs any introduction. But in case you've been living under a stone for the last 15 years, we have Adam Back, who is the father of proof of work, the CEO of Blockstream. And Blockstream seems to do a little bit of everything. It does mining, it does hardware wallets, it does pretty much everything in the Bitcoin ecospace. But there's one thing that this guy, he might be a genius, but don't listen to his price predictions. And then we have Sven Hildebrandt. Sven's day job, he works for Börse Stuttgart Digital, which is one of the largest crypto exchanges for digital assets and for crypto in Germany. That's his day job.
Yeah, and I've got a night job as well, that's correct.
He might look like a crypto dude. He might walk like a crypto dude, but he's actually one of the best weapons that Bitcoin has got in Europe, because he also serves with me on the board of EBIR, the European Bitcoin Energy Association. And then last up, we have Sam Tabar. Sam is the CEO of Bit Digital, which is a NASDAQ-listed company, a Bitcoin mining company, worth $400 million.
350.
Is it not working? Can I take this off because it keeps falling off? Thank you very much. Is that better? Can you hear that better? Okay, fantastic. They don't just mine Bitcoin, you do also do ETH staking, but hey, a guy has got to eat, a guy has got to feed his family. So I imagine, all of you sitting in the room today, I can't imagine that there's one person here who believes that Bitcoin mining is bad for the environment. I don't think anyone's going to have paid this much for a ticket if they don't already understand all the use cases that there are, or the potential use cases that there are for Bitcoin mining and the energy infrastructure. So we don't really want to talk theoretically today. Let's talk about the practical things. What is actually happening? Where is Bitcoin mining really helping with the energy infrastructure? So if I can put the first question to you, Adam. With Blockstream, you mine in the US and you mine in Canada. Which of your facilities are actually doing one of the following: demand response, heat recapture, methane mitigation? Where are you concretely helping to form the energy infrastructure?
There's a bit of sort of curtailment, if you like, in both locations. So in Canada, the Quebec province is primarily hydro, so high 90s, 97, 98% hydro. But nevertheless, they have the right under the power contracts to ask you to turn the equipment off if there's a period of extraordinary demand in a winter storm or something. So that will happen maybe once a year. And then in the Texas area, we're actually using a wind farm, and it overflows to the grid. And we do curtailment there, so when the power prices get high, we voluntarily and in our own financial interest will spin down machines reactive to that.
Can I put the same question to you, Sam? Because I know you don't just mine in the US and Canada, but you also are doing some mining in Iceland. Can you give us a lowdown on how you're helping?
Yeah, we have tens of thousands of miners across the US, Canada, and also in Iceland. And in Iceland, it's primarily geothermal, which is volcanic power. And Iceland is a very small country in terms of population, but has an abundance of energy. And a lot of that energy goes unused. And so we help monetize some of that unused energy. despite that, politicians tend to politicize the industry, and we're seeing that. We saw that in Iceland, which is one of the reasons why we also now have an HPC business, an AI business, where we have thousands of servers that are serving a client that's working on AI, and I can get into that if that's of interest. But we do have our Bitcoin mining operations also in Iceland, and these things have been politicized, and we see what's going on. It's now become an electoral issue in the United States between Biden and Trump, and it's actually existential in many ways what happens in that election, because of all the tax harmonization that goes on in the world. Depending on the results of the election in the US, it's going to affect Europe and the rest of the world, how this industry is going to look like. And I have predictions that I'm pretty sure are accurate if one or the other wins, which again will have a knock-on effect in Europe, which we can get into later during the panel.
I'd be quite interested to hear your prediction. Go on, what if Trump gets in, what's going to happen?
Well, just before I answer that question, Bit Digital we used to have our entire fleet in China before they announced the Bitcoin mining ban. And when about 6 months before they announced the ban, we thought it was a jurisdictional risk to have tens and tens of thousands of miners in a country where the rules can change overnight on you. So we started to migrate that entire fleet from China into North America to get a bit of jurisdictional diversification. And we started that process during COVID, which was very difficult because the logistic routes of basically migrating all these machines during that time, during COVID, was very, very tricky. So we did all that, and then they announced the ban. So people thought we were paranoid, and you know the old saying, the paranoid survives, and we survived, and our peers didn't. They were stuck in China. So now we were in the U.S., and then we started to hear some noise. We got letters. I got a letter from Senator Warren, Elizabeth Warren, who's leading the anti-crypto movement in the United States. She writes very nasty letters to my company and other companies in my sector in the United States. And so we thought, okay, maybe we need to migrate our fleet more and bring it also in Iceland and Europe, where maybe maybe they're more measured about things and they're not going to politicize the crypto movement and the Bitcoin mining movement. We see now that if Biden wins, he's going to be putting a 30% tax on the Bitcoin mining sector, which is equivalent to banning the sector. It's just a backdoor way to ban the entire sector. There'll be no more Bitcoin mining if Biden wins because of that 30% tax that he wants to impose on the sector. And we've seen Trump. Trump just met in Florida with some of my peers in Florida. I'm not saying I'm pro-Trump, but unfortunately, Trump has the most forward-looking position on Bitcoin mining. He understands it's actually not a threat against the environment, but it's just a shame that this technology has now become politicized, where the Democrats are anti-crypto and the Republicans are pro-crypto or pro-Bitcoin, and it's become that situation. And so if Trump wins, there's going to be an unleashing of the Bitcoin mining sector in the United States because he's very, very supportive of it. And if Biden wins, there's going to be a ban of the sector. It's a very existential issue on how this election goes.
I think we in Europe, we're always slightly behind our American cousins over the pond. And we look across and we see that there's the Bitcoin Policy Institute, you have the Satoshi Action Fund, you have the Texas blockchain, and all these people are advocating for Bitcoin mining on a political level. And in Europe, we had nothing. I work for Terahash Space, which is a German startup which works in the Bitcoin mining space. And we were seeing how necessary it is that we do have a voice at the table for Bitcoin in Europe. And so we set up, together with 7 great partners, the European Bitcoin Energy Association, of which Sven and his company, Börse Stuttgart Digital, supported us, which was an amazing coup to get such a fiat company on board helping us out. Sven, when you hear about what he talks about politicizing it, What are you trying to achieve?
Yeah, well, first of all, it doesn't surprise me at all that a topic like this is going to be politicized, and it's not only politicized in the US, it's also politicized in Europe. Coming from a traditional financial house, I usually wear white shirts and ties, and I'm talking to regulators a lot, which is fun sometimes. Then you have the impression that you first have a political issue because Bitcoin is money, and when you're looking at states and governments and stuff like that, then there might sometimes people might sometimes say things although they know they're incorrect, but they still say the things even though they're knowing it's incorrect because it is a political issue. That's the one hand, and then on the other hand, the typical Bitcoin miner is not somebody who's like very much forward-looking is the wrong word, but not really embracing with the regulator. Let's say that, at least not the ones that I met here in Europe. So I think there's a missing gap, and what we're doing with the EBA, and I really like that, and I think it's a wonderful institution. We're actually bringing the miners together, bring a little bit of the regulatory and legal knowledge in there, and we all learn from each other and try to actually get the best outcome and get the regulators on board as well. I think one of the things that I'm always very amazed of is that truth oftentimes does not really matter. But noise does.
Yeah.
And that is something that I'm very much afraid of. So I want to be part of the truth side of things. And this is what I'm working tirelessly on after I'm done working with the normal stuff.
And what do you need mostly? What do you need from the miners in order to be able to achieve what you want to achieve?
Yeah, so in Europe, there's the MiCA in place. That's the Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation that all crypto asset services have to abide by January 25. So it's coming in the next months. And every crypto asset service provider has to do ESG reporting. And for that ESG reporting, there's different numbers that those crypto asset service providers need to report. So if there is anybody sitting in this audience here who is a big miner, well, if you're a big miner, talk to me. If you are a pool, especially talk to me, because there's 3 data sets that we need to begin with. One is the machine type, the other one is the country, and there's an uptime that we also need. And with that, we can improve reporting so that we don't have to rely on Dutch central bankers reporting to report.
Well, just to let you know, we're very happy to work with you and give you the transparency you need in order to arm you with the data to fight for the truth.
Perfect.
We heard that here, everybody. We heard that here. We've got a supporter. Adam, would you say that the work that's going on the political level is helpful in the US? That it's moving the industry forward faster?
Well, I think the fact that there was a bipartisan bill, like before the recent news, was positive. Unfortunately, it got vetoed. And I think the fact that both of the main political parties that are vying to get elected are, developing a pro-Bitcoin talking points is positive in the sense that, that should, if they stick by election promises, it should at least have a conversation which is, positive going forward. It's better if it's bipartisan than if it's, one party versus another, because then you could get swept along, and that could be negative if the party that is takes an anti-Bitcoin stance. So I think it's healthier if, all the major parties are positive for, economic success and Bitcoin and more power generation in the future, which is, one of the things that Bitcoin drives is the economic backdrop to actually expand the power infrastructure.
Well, yeah, Adam, I respectfully disagree that there is a bipartisan movement when it comes to Bitcoin, particularly Bitcoin mining. The Democrats have been very clear, unfortunately, on where they stand on Bitcoin mining, judging by the letters I received from congressional leaders and the promises that Biden has made, particularly in connection to a 30% tax on the sector.
What impact is AI having at the moment on Bitcoin mining? What are you seeing in the industry? Have you noticed a difference, Adam?
Well, we haven't done any AI activities, but we do see that the AI workloads are competing for power. And, you know, as a colleague on the panel here said, the AI workload is actually willing to pay more for power. So they have a higher profit margin. I think that just basically stems to the cost of data center grade GPU farms is much more expensive per megawatt. So they have more expensive infrastructure, more expensive cooling, more expensive machines. So the cost of the power is a lesser concern to them. And so they'll happily pay more than Bitcoin miners will. So if that happens in certain locations, the Bitcoin miners will just go and do their mining somewhere else or develop new sites in lower cost locations. So in a way, you know, there's probably going to be places already and continuing where Bitcoin has incentivized some grid infrastructure expansion and data center development that then, you know, economically supports the AI workload while the Bitcoiners go prospecting for new low-cost power.
So in the end, it's a good thing because it's in the ethos of Bitcoin to make Bitcoin mining more decentralized in the end. Something to be embraced, not worried about?
Well, decentralization is good, of course, but yeah, I just mean that Bitcoin is very competitive in the mining space, and it's very cost sensitive, and the biggest input cost is the power cost. So they are kind of prospectors looking to develop new cheap power, and that causes them to search globally. You know, I mean, we've had discussions on the panel yesterday about Paraguay and Uruguay, where Tether is, you know, putting miners in the ground there, and apparently they have a lot of hydropower as well. So it's good to see, you know, the activities spread globally, I would say.
I mean, I think it's true to say that Bitcoin mining is really the only area of Bitcoin which is complete fiat. I mean, you don't see Nasdaq-listed companies with Lightning or hardware wallets. Why is it?
Yeah.
Why has this development happened?
Well, that is so close to the fiat world, so I got to chime in. I think what we're seeing, or actually I'm seeing this day by day. We're just at the we're still. I mean, when I'm sitting next to Adam, it feels a little bit unreal to say that, but we're so at the very beginning. And I mean, talking to regulated financial institutions, to big banks and all stuff like that, they're slowly moving in. But I mean, I've been in the intersection of Bitcoin and the traditional financial world for quite some time now. And what now is actually happening is that they're really doing it. So they're not talking about it anymore. You still have some who say, okay, let's tokenize that bond or something like that. But they are implementing now, and the time of talking is over. And I think when this gets like more, when you're a bank or traditional financial institution, you usually don't want to start like doing self-custody from day number one. This is not how they operate. So what they do is that they come to us, they buy the Bitcoin, they let the Bitcoin lie with us in our custody solution. This is how it goes. But then the whole process evolves, and people get more and more, people and companies get more and more comfortable. They also get more the understanding of what not your keys, not your coins is, and stuff like that. So we're just at the very beginning, and we will be seeing a lot, like really a lot of listed companies who will be taking Bitcoin on their balance sheet, who will be doing heat reuse with Bitcoin mining and stuff like that. It is just the beginning. It hasn't even started yet.
I mean, when you look at Bitcoin mining and the history of it, I mean, every 4 years we have this halving, which halves the income for the Bitcoin miners, and it becomes an unrecognizable business before. I mean, when you started off, you could mine on your computer, then you needed the GPU. Now we've got the ASICs. And we could not have predicted what would come into the future. So how do you see, Adam, how do you see the next 10 years panning out? Are you working on products in Blockstream for the next generation miners, and how do you think that will look like?
Yeah, I mean, there are more competitors building new ASICs and new miners than was the case, 3 or 4 years ago, let's say. MicroBT wasn't active in the market at that time. That's a new company. They make very nice miners. Block is involved in building ASICs as well now. They have their own ASIC product. And
Are they building in the US?
they're doing, I believe the design team is in the US. Of course, the actual fabs are, in Taiwan and other places, right? The US is starting to do some like on-the-ground development of ASIC manufacturing plants in the US, but they take many years to build. But there is some initiative in some countries to have wafer production domestically, because it's it's a concern for the global economy that everybody's relying on a few fabs in a few countries. So there's a kind of geopolitical diversity for ASICs, and they're thinking about automotive, aviation, computers. It's pervasive, right? And then Blockstream itself acquired Spondoolies, which is an older ASIC company that was making ASICs in 2013 onwards time period. So we're developing a new ASIC, and one of the things that we are gearing to do is to make a more data center ready form factor. So a rack mount that fits in standard data center racks, and actually a kind of blade server format. So 14U, so roughly a 2-foot cube with 10 blade servers that you can swap in and out. So one of the advantages of that design is that you can upgrade it. So you can pull out a card and put a replacement. Or when there's a new ASIC or a more efficient version coming out, you can swap the card and keep the rest of the machine, which is a non-trivial part of the cost of the machine.
And by the way, which is a very important factor when it comes to the ESG reporting, by the way, because the ESG reporting under MiCA also has a section for it when it comes to the electronic waste that is produced by Bitcoin miners. So this is actually a wonderful development, and also something that we need to talk about more, so that more and more people know what the industry is actually doing to progress. So actually, I didn't know that before. So that's very good to hear.
Yeah, I think the other thing that has shifted over the years is the useful economic life of a Bitcoin ASIC has very much extended. I think in the first few years of transition from GPUs and FPGAs to ASICs, they were catching up, so they'd start on 65 nanometer, even though they were currently shipping hardware on the 28, and then, within 6 months, they'd switch to 40. And so the lifespan of these things were like 6 months or a year at most. And now, people are getting 4 years plus economic life. So you as a manufacturer, you have to build the equipment to last. And the fact that it lasts for longer means that, there's kind of like less electronics to discard or recycle per year, let's say.
Yeah.
You're running for longer.
Yeah. Well, the challenge with that is, though, that some of the mining manufacturers and some of the industry, they're like very secretive. So it is very hard, especially, Rachel, how I struggle sometimes to actually get the right data. Seven's great that you actually said, yeah, we're going to share the data, but this is actually a real struggle, because there's a missing information, and then if you don't have proper information, you just can make it up. And so I think that is something where we as an industry have to work on, to find ways to collaborate in a way that not one entity needs to share confidential data, or to share it in a way that these entities actually feel comfortable with this. I think that's something that we all need to work on in the future.
Mm-hmm. Sam, what do you do with all your old machines? When do you have a second life cycle for them?
Well, so we have different grades of machines, and the more efficient ones we keep them turned on. But as it depends on where the price of Bitcoin is. So if Bitcoin is going sideways, like a lot of our machines will just be retired, and they're put in a warehouse in Texas, and they collect dust. They're very expensive paperweights at that point. But going back to the good work that you're doing, the thing that annoys me about the work that you're doing is is that why is our sector, it's only our sector that people are putting us through the ringer. There's no other sector in all of the world that is put under the spotlight for energy usage. The banking sector, zero accountability. name any sector you have in mind. There's no sector that's put under the microscope in terms of its energy usage like Bitcoin miners, which is, I think, crap. Because if you look at the energy usage that Californians use on domestic drying to dry their clothes, tumble dryers, that's more energy than Bitcoin mining. Did you know that? To dry clothes for people in California, when they use their tumble dryers, they use more energy than Bitcoin mining worldwide. Yeah. So it's really crazy that we have to be even talking about this.
Well,
but I applaud the good work that you're doing.
Well, the thing is, I'm not making the rules, right?
No,
so I'm not. By the way, I'm not the regulator. Yeah, just don't shoot me, right? Don't shoot me. So I'm not the regulator.
No, I understand.
I'm just the one who reads the texts, and sometimes I read stuff like that, and I disagree, right? Yeah. I read things and I disagree.
All the ATMs in the world and the offices the banks use and all that stuff that Bitcoin can basically take out. They don't measure that. But to your question on AI, Rachel, so one of the things that we're always put under this existential threat: is this sector going to be gone through regulation? And I don't think it's being paranoid. We were paranoid in China, and they tried to do it, and they did. And so I am assuming that politicians are not reasonable people, and they just go by noise, as you called it. And so I'm assuming the worst. I'll continue to have a fleet that's 93% carbon-free, by the way, not carbon neutral. Carbon neutrality is a hoax. Carbon-free is what you want to do. So let me just explain the difference. Again, 93% of our fleet is carbon-free. We draw from clean sources of power: hydro, geothermal, wind, whatever. That's clean sources of power. Carbon neutrality is you use fossil fuels and then you buy certificates to undo the damage that you've done, which is equivalent to taking a shit in a room and taking an air freshener and using it to cover up the smell. That's the same thing. So when you hear carbon neutrality, just understand what that actually means. But going back to the existential threat of this sector, we've had to create an entire new vertical, HPC, basically AI, where we have, a ton of H100s from NVIDIA, which we imported from California to Iceland in order to create this business, because the regulators have not politicized AI yet. And so, we have this new vertical, and that vertical is not subjected to the halving like you talked about. Every 4 years, the margins for Bitcoin mining gets cut in half. And that's very difficult from a business perspective. So we started this AI business, and we used our skills and our expertise in procuring specialized machines and identifying data centers and putting the two together. And that's basically the skills that you have as a Bitcoin miner. We just applied that to high-performance computing, HPC or AI, synonymous. So we did that because there's no halving event in HPC. There's no halving event in AI. So that is a more predictable business for us. And so that's something that we've done on the HPC side. And I think it was Adam, or I can't remember who mentioned it, but somebody mentioned that, I think it was Adam, that it's very expensive to create a data center for HPC. It's actually 10 times more expensive to build an HPC AI data center than it is a Bitcoin mining sector. Why would we do that then? Well, it's 10 times more profitable to have an HPC business, so you use 90% less energy to have 10 times more revenue on 90% less energy. So that's a very big margin for us, big profit margin. So that's why we've been very interested in the HPC side of the business. So we have this fleet, this Bitcoin mining fleet, tens of thousands of miners. We'll keep it going, but we have to keep our eye on the politics. and the HPC business, which is, we hope, immune to politics for the time being.
But I don't think that the politicians are going to, or the regulators are going to politicize AI.
No.
Because you've got the massive corporations behind
Right.
it. And this is what we're seeing with Terahash, that if we can get the corporations behind Bitcoin mining, once you've got the energy companies understanding the use of Bitcoin mining, that's when you bring the real power into it. And that's what will turn the politicians to understand. I mean, we're seeing it every day. We're even having the politicians coming and having a look at our energy lab and seeing how it works. Once we've managed to educate the energy companies as to why we need Bitcoin mining, particularly in Europe when we're trying to get to renewable energies. I mean, I know that artificial intelligence is a big competitor when it comes to taking the electricity, but what they can't do is they can't be flexible.
That's right.
And what Bitcoin mining is, it's flexible. So when you're looking at demand response,
Right.
there's no argument between AI and. So this is what we need to do. We need to work at this on many levels.
Yeah.
And it's not just educating the politicians, but it's educating the energy companies as to why we need to do this. And you've been successful in Texas. But Texas is a case unto itself. How do we do that in the rest of the world? Any tips on how to do that in Europe? Adam?
Yeah, I don't know about how to handle politics. We had a few issues in Canada, actually, in that front, in the sense that when we started mining in the Quebec province, the local province had an initiative at the state level to encourage businesses to relocate to this area to do Bitcoin mining and provide, buy the excess hydropower to bring economic wealth to the industry locally, provide employment, and after a number of years there was an election and it became an election issue, and then they placed a kind of moratorium on new power to miners, so they're not making new power available. But it doesn't make a lot of economic sense to me because they generally have a vast excess of hydropower, and they'll just sell it to the US at cost or something, right? So they're really giving away economic prosperity for their own region. Now that power company is a crown corporation, so it's a government-owned entity. So I think if it was a private industry or a privately owned power generation with a profit-seeking company, they wouldn't necessarily operate in this way.
Yeah, that's what you call politics then, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, we just went for geographic diversity and expanded in the US. I mean, Bitcoin mining.
That is what you call regulatory arbitrage then.
Right, yeah. I mean, I think some people have said, Bitcoin doesn't need you. You need Bitcoin. So if you're hostile to Bitcoin in a region, the Bitcoin mining just moves elsewhere. So you have facilities in Iceland. Our first experience of that was, expanding in the US instead of in Canada. That's their loss. And, that's continuing. We saw on the panel yesterday that Tether is going for Uruguay, Paraguay. There are lots of cheap power in the world. There's lots of excess power. There's not actually a shortage of power.
Tether also recently invested in Bitdeer, which is interesting.
We've just got 5 minutes left. Can we just talk a little bit about open source? I mean, I think Bitcoin mining is one of the arguments against it is how closed source it is. You don't know what's actually going on in the machines. You don't know what's going on in the pools. Are we making any progress in open source for Bitcoin miners?
I mean, I think that probably most closely applies to the ASIC design. And so, at different times, people have expressed an interest in having open specifications, so you can look at the blueprints for the chips and so on. And another part of it is patents. So the ASIC industry in general involves lots of licensing and patents, not to do with the Bitcoin application, but just to do with how the ASICs are built. So you'll have to license hundreds of patents or libraries from the foundry just to make a basic chip. So the problem is, even if you open source all of your parts of the blueprint, somebody wouldn't actually be able to build it. If they took the blueprints to the fab and said, build me one of these, they'd also have to license all this stuff. So, now, of course, it's good to have reference open source for things, but it has a big barrier to entry, which is negotiating with a foundry and manufacturing it. So, I think the rest of it is more open, like the firmware. There are open source firmware and things like that available.
Are you supporting any initiatives in this area?
Well, I mean, we are working on on the ASIC, and we're quite supportive of the initiative to have open source firmware, and Brains OS is doing that. So we're very interested to make the firmware for the miners that we manufacture open so that people can modify them. I think it's a bad direction for some of the Chinese miners have actually, beyond being closed source, they've started to put DRM on them so that it becomes difficult to upgrade the firmware.
Can you just explain to me what DRM is?
Well, it was originally about controlling copying of music and video and audio files by the content production industry, but it came to apply also to software. So they've tried to make it so that you can't upgrade the software on your own computer. So if you think about the miner as I bought a computer, and then the manufacturer won't let you upgrade the software, you'll be frustrated, right? And the software that's on it is buggy or not optimized, and so it's quite inconvenient. And so, the company makes Brains OS, which is an open source replacement firmware for many of these machines. And the way that they reacted to it was to try and prevent the software upgrade, which was actually better software. The more open-minded thing to do would be to embrace it and pre-install it and not have the cost of maintaining, the internal software. So, yeah.
Well, I think thank you very much for all your input on the state of mining today and where it's going in the future. Can you put your hands together, please, for Adam, for Sven, and for Sam? And if I can do one final plug, and this is unashamedly a plug, please support IBEA as much as you can. It doesn't matter whether you're a mining company, what you're to do with Bitcoin. Listen, Bitcoin does not need the EU, but the EU needs Bitcoin. So please support the initiative of IBEA so that we can, not just at the grassroots level, but also at the regulatory level, get moving with Bitcoin in Europe. Thank you very much.